Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Really, the podcast with your hosts, Jason Alexander and...
I got to say my own name, Peter Tillman.
I got tired of doing it. And this is the show where Peter and I explore things that make us say, really?
No, really.
Yeah.
Really? No, really? Really? No, really? Really?
I read a little tidbit in the Charlotte Observer. That there was a school student, I believe junior high or high school student, in Tennessee who is suing the Board of Ed because they refused to pass a law that would ban gum chewing in school. Now, it is not that she doesn't like, gum or that she is offended in some way by people chewing gum. It's that she suffers from a thing called misophonia.
Hallelujah.
And the sound of gum chewing
like Laurie's
drives her to distraction, if not to the point of breaking.
I live it.
And that's right. So this is something that...
You brought that up, and I said, I have that. I didn't realize that I had misophonia, and everybody I mentioned it to, that we're going to do an episode, starts wondering if they have it, because over 20% of the population has it. As a matter of fact, one of our producers mentioned, we talked about it, episode 1, I think, we talked about episode, he's been getting push notifications since that episode about misophonia, and he only mentioned it once, or heard it mentioned once, and it's been coming out forever, right?
And you claim, sir, to suffer from this.
So I didn't realize what it was until a couple of years ago, but you're doing it with the clicking the pen. It's making me crazy. I can't, it's so distracting to me that it's not just...
So this actually does... I didn't think you would notice, because you went for a moment and it looked like... I was only doing it to see if you would pick up on it. So you really did, right?
But the weird thing, and if you're listening, and we're going to talk about the world getting, which is incredible, how much noisier the world has gotten and why, okay? Yeah. And how many people are afflicted with things now because how much noisier the world is and how dangerous that's becoming, above and beyond misophonia. But I think people listening... David Guggenheim, when we were talking about it, said, wait a minute, my daughter everybody starts asking questions, because I, for years, just thought I was you just think you're annoyed by noises.
Right, which to some degree everybody is.
Everybody.
Yeah.
But the reaction is different, and I thought it was just me, a mess. We would be riding in the car, my wife and I'd be talking in the front, and my kids would be talking in the back, and I would be my chest would get tight. I could feel my heartbeat. It would make me nuts. I couldn't fight the noise. You couldn't get rid of that. That pen cut through everything else.
Right.
My brain focuses on that, and I start losing it.
You had mentioned that you wanted to explore this, and I thought it's not a thing. And then you and I were flying home the other day. We were flying home from Las Vegas. From St. Louis. Yeah. So it was a 4-hour flight, and you had a lollipop in your mouth. Mm-hmm. On a plane, and I have headphones on, but I'm sitting next to you. And every 5 to 8 seconds, I would hear. And I thought, I have to see, this is going to be a contest with myself now. How long can I take this? Will I outlast the lollipop? How long can this lollipop
last? By the way, big
last?
lollipop.
There's no way.
Big lollipop.
And after 30, I timed it. After 32 minutes, I lost it.
Jason turns to me
you out of nowhere and said, I'm either going to shove that down your throat or yank it out of your mouth.
Okay, so now
if
you
don't
feeling.
Get that goddamn lollipop out of your mouth.
But did you ever feel that about anything else with the sound? Did sound ever make you crazy before?
I'm not sure that I suffer quite from this. Let's talk to someone who might be able to help you. We are happy to welcome Dr. Jane Gregory, who is a clinical psychologist and a misophonia researcher, Peter, who founded the first 2 misophonia clinics, one in London and one in Oxford. And at the end of this episode, I'm sending you to the one of your choice. She has co-authored the S5, the world's first valid and reliable questionnaire that captures the complexity of the misophonia experience. Thank you very much. There it is. You have it. And she's also the author of the book Sounds Like Misophonia, How to Stop Small Sounds from Causing Extreme Reactions.
That's almost a comedy title. Sounds Like Misophonia.
Right? And I'm actually delighted to introduce her, but then I feel like I should shut up because I'm worried that every sound I'm making is driving her up the wall. Welcome. Welcome to you, Dr. Gregory. Nice to have you here on Really No Really.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for starting with a sound that drives me mad.
Which is the pen. The pen. Isn't that insane?
Yeah. flashbacks to exams in high school of people just clicking it.
You know, it was our producer David Guggenheim that said you should try and figure out what's going to get Peter and get him going. And I went, yeah, but what if the doctor? And he didn't care. He was callous to your needs and concerns.
May I just say, I
was testing to see, because when Peter was focused on starting the show, I wanted to see specifically if it's something that you have to be focused. Is it happening only when, you know, you're not focused, or where any stimulation could get to you? Or you know, is it something that could cut through even when he was focused on something else? What do you find is the truth to that? Do people generally, if they have this, no matter what they're doing, where they are, what they're focused on, it will cut through?
I think there are some sounds that will probably cut through, like eating sounds are the biggest ones, and it's almost like their brains are waiting for it to happen, and so once it starts, it's there. But there was actually a study done, I think it was at Concordia University, where they had people with low levels of misophonia, like as in not misophonia, and high misophonia, and they masked a sound with another sound, and so that once they took the other sound away, eventually the trigger sound would be detectable.
Right.
Wow.
And there was no difference at the point at which they detected the trigger sound.
Really?
And so it's probably more that they're listening out for sounds. They're more likely to be like looking for sounds or listening out for sounds than actually there being a mechanism that makes them be able to detect it sooner. But the other thing is that once they've heard it, they can't tune it out.
Right.
Whereas somebody without misophonia might hear that click, not even register it because they've tuned it out so quickly. Whereas if once I've heard a pen clicking or a clock ticking is another one.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Everyone used to know which office I was in when I was working, because I would either leave the clock out the door, and so it would just be sitting outside the door, or I would take the batteries out and then forget to put them back in because the clocks were just
So what are the sounds? Do you have a list? Give me your list of stuff that really sets you off.
My biggest one, so those sort of like clicky ticky kind of sounds, the classic eating sounds, really heavy breathing sounds, which, I mean, it's obviously a bit creepy anyway, but and then the weirdest one for me is the sound of pigeons, that repetitive kind of weird, not quite cooing sound that pigeons make.
Oh, that's sort of almost like throat thing? Yeah.
That thing. Well, I get woodpeckers kill me. If a woodpecker's really going at it, it's you're taking your life in your own hands.
That's an annoying sound.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I also owls, the hoot thing makes me nuts. The neighbor's alarm if it goes off. Beep, beep, back up. When trucks are backing up,
yeah,
they have a camera.
Alarms and reverse sounds, they're actually designed for you not to ignore them. So they're meant to not be ignored. Whereas with misophonia, it sounds that most people would be able to eventually tune them out, but people with misophonia can't.
For instance, going back to eating sounds, is it equally disturbing to you or other people if you are the person making the sound?
No, it doesn't affect me.
Doesn't affect
I'm
you at all.
making
Now,
it.
why would that be?
There's something to do with control. Like if I'm in control of the sound, I know I can stop it at any time. Like if I could pause the person eating opposite me, I would probably be fine. That's one of the things we actually do in therapy, just to sort of regain a sense of control, is get the person, pretend you've got a remote control and pause and fast forward and slow it down. And it just helps to just create new associations in the brain where it sort of makes you feel more in control of the sound, even though ultimately you won't be. But your brain now is almost like tricked into thinking you've got a bit more control over sounds than you really do.
Have you ever lost it? Because by the pool, we had kids and we wanted to go somewhere where there were no kids. Just, not because we don't like kids, but we wanted to get away, young kids. And we're in Palm Springs at the swimming pool. And there were a couple kids, and there was one, like I said, that's 8. And he's in the pool, and he was going, Dad, look at me. Look at me. Dad, look at me. Look at me. Look at me. By the 5th look at me, I'm now almost in a rage. No one else cares, it seems. By the 15th look at me is when I yelled out, look at him! Because I couldn't control myself. Have you ever lost it where you just went over?
Not since I was a kid in that way. Most of the time now I will just remove myself from the situation or try and deal with it if I can. But also I've done a lot of work to try and not get to that point where it drives me that insane, and I can tolerate these sounds now. If I have to, I will. But that example, there's something else going on there. And there's something about the meaning behind the sound as well, because that's a kid that's being ignored. And so it's not just the acoustics of it. There's actually like, oh, this kid is trying to get someone's attention and they're not being listened to. So there's a sort of an emotional.
Didn't care about that. Could care less if that kid was. It was make it
to-
stop. I know you're trying to be nice
put a
and,
positive
and
spin
cover
on
me
that
and
for
give
you,
me.
Peter.
No,
Come
I just
on.
hated it. I hated it. I wanted to stop. Please just stop it.
But so you know what's interesting? Because I just thought of a sound that I do think drives just about anyone into a state of at least stress, if not distress. And yet I think the natural reason for the sound was not to do that. And that is the sound of a baby crying. You know, we like on a plane, we know why they're crying. Their ears are stuffed. They can't take the pressure or they're uncomfortable. We get it. We're sympathetic. But the average person on a plane will get to the point of, you know, almost getting hostile if the
you can't
ongoing
escape it,
and
Yeah.
it's such a strange reaction to that kind of sound. So I guess what I'm trying to
That's
say
what
is
I feel with the pen
though I
cleaner.
don't have this, I am sympathetic to having the notion of sounds that create emotional responses.
Yeah, and that's a really good example of like a really conflicting emotional experience, because you are feeling compassion for this poor baby, but I think most people are probably getting angry at the parents. It's like the parents should be doing something to make this stop and make my experience more comfortable.
Yeah.
And as Peter said, you can't escape that. And so for the same reason, if someone starts to get a little bit panicky on a plane, they're much more likely to have a full-blown panic attack because there's nowhere to go. You can't get away from that.
Yeah.
So because everybody, and before you came on, you mentioned wherever you go when you start talking about this, there's always somebody who goes, "Wait a minute, it's not me." The Queen Elizabeth, ready for this, would demand that she had. You probably know this
About the
right?
ice?
Ice that she had rounded ice cubes. She had misophonia. She could-
rounded ice
rounded ice cubes because square ice cubes make clink and they make noise, and she could not take it. She only had rounded ice cubes. How about that?
And rounded ice cubes
Don't make the kind
It
of
makes
noise.
a different sound.
well, son of a gun.
How-
How would she have discovered that?
Well,
That's
you're
so
the queen. You have all day to figure.
Yeah, right.
It's not like she's really busy.
Cedric, knock
Let's try
the corners
star
off the
shape. Can we have
cubes.
some triangles? Let's just
11
see.
shades before the rounded. And people,
Try a pyramid.
And there's also some people who react to the sound of hot water being poured, but not cold water, because there's also a slightly
well,
different
those people
sound.
are nuts. I'm kidding. Franz Kafka, is this correct? Lined his. This is such a great story, if it's true. Lined his bedroom walls with cork for sound, and then developed an allergy to cork, which I just love that you go to that trouble because you're out of your mind with the sounds, and then you get sick from the cork. Yeah. Oh, Jay, this thing is really affects a lot of people.
Dr. Is it only repetitive sounds, or could it be like, for instance, has anyone ever had this reaction to music other than just a certain note, just music playing? Would that?
Some people have it to certain types of music. So sometimes it's music that is repetitive, like a really heavy bass or something like that. But also, quite a few people have said with jazz, because it feels so unpredictable and it doesn't
Right.
follow the
It's-
pattern
and often
that you
atonal,
expect
yeah,
of music.
yeah.
You want to know my music?
With
one?
Peter, it's show tunes, right? Show tunes?
No, I love show tunes. You know what mine is?
What?
And I'm embarrassed to say it, but if you're going to cruise and they decide to play every song you've ever loved on steel drum, I want to kill myself. I'm going to kill myself. Sunshine of Your Love on a steel drum should be banned. Okay, any Hendrix tune on a steel drum.
Inagata Davida
Inagata
on
Davida on
steel
steel drum should be.
Don't take
should
that
be
away
banned.
from
Oh my
me.
god! Oh my god! Why is that the only instrument on a cruise they can't buy? I'll pitch in for a guitar. I'll pitch in for a flute, but steel drum, really? Yesterday.
Oh, I got it.
Okay, got it.
You doing it is annoying me, actually. So generally, when now that it is, determined to be a condition, when do people find they get diagnosed with
Right,
it? When
that's-
There's still no confirmed diagnostic criteria for it.
No.
We see patients in the NHS, in the National Health Service in England, and for us to consider something a disorder, and in inverted commas, it needs to cause significant distress and have some kind of ongoing impact or interference in
Excuse me?
day-to-day life.
How dare you?
And so has it not qualified yet under that term?
It's still very newly recognized. Like there was this paper that came out, I think it was just last year, the consensus definition, which was a panel of experts who came together to say, this is how we define it based on what we know currently. But there's been more research on this in the last 2 years than there ever was in total before. So we're still very much at the beginning of understanding this. So we don't know, is it an audiological problem? Is it a psychological problem? Is it a neurological problem? It could be a combination of all of those things.
Right.
We just don't have the research to be able to categorize it and classify it in that way.
So how do am I understanding that this questionnaire is something that you helped to develop that helps to diagnose it, basically?
That's mainly used for research purposes, so we can look at like the severity of the symptoms, and we can use that to compare it to other items on other questionnaires, so we can see, well, how does it relate to depression symptoms, for example, or anxiety or something like that, or we can see how it changes over time. And we also use it in therapy to monitor change as a result of therapy. There is now a cutoff score for that, to say over that cutoff score, someone is likely to have misophonia, but that cutoff score is for what we'd call subclinical as well as clinical misophonia. So that's people who would have this extreme reaction and wouldn't be able to tolerate it for very long, but it doesn't necessarily cause that day-to-day impact. The research hasn't been done yet to find that cutoff score for a disorder level of misophonia, so we don't know what the prevalence is where it's that extreme, but we know that there are a lot of people out there who are really, really suffering on a day-to-day basis.
I often wonder when I see an act of violence, like a neighbor loses it, and you hear about it, that there was a bark, the dog drove him crazy, or somebody cut somebody off and honked at them in traffic, I always wonder if that's an outcropping of this because the person just couldn't take it anymore. Because if you're living next door to a neighbor, we're in a different world as far as personal space. There are more people being loud with their car stereos, with their devices, because we're carrying stuff, than I've ever heard before. We're at the airport, and the guys are walking on their phone going, yeah, Hal, the meeting is, and I got to hear, and that kind of makes me crazy too. Yeah. I'm wondering, the most extreme cases, have they been diagnosed ever with that the reason they went off is because of the noise and because of the cadence and the rhythm?
Or a misophonia defense? I'm serious. Has someone ever claimed it?
There has been a few newspaper articles where it says, well, they had misophonia and they exploded. But if someone's also like that dysregulated that they can't control themselves and they're harming people, then it's not just misophonia.
Bigger
There's
issue.
something else going on there. And it wouldn't be helpful to make that direct connection, because that then stops people from getting help for misophonia, because it then gets associated with violence and extreme behavior. But I'm really interested, you were saying about cutting off in traffic, and that's something that I'm really interested in, comparing that sort of explosive anger to the explosive anger that happens in misophonia. And there's a study that was about that kind of explosive anger, like road rage, and hasn't been done in the context of misophonia, but it feels, based on seeing patients with this and talking to people with misophonia, it feels similar, where it's this idea of, they call it social exchange rules, which are like the rules that help us to all function together and get along in society. And it includes things like, I'm behaving and therefore I expect you to behave, and I'm following the rules, I expect you to follow the rules. And so something like on public transport, if somebody is using a phone on loudspeaker, we're all following the rules and you're not, and that's a violation of these social rules that help us all to just be able to live together in society. And that's one of this paper that I read, was saying that's one of the biggest causes of that explosive anger, is a violation of one of those rules, and that can be even stronger from people who you really need them to be
right. Well, that's why
following
I asked,
those rules.
because I would think, I know for years I thought I was just more irritated than other people, and I never brought it up, never said anything about it. And when I heard it's misophonia and can be identified, it was fascinating to me, because it's not like it's so horrible that I felt alone, but it identified a lot of things for me, going, I'm not crazy, I'm not a lunatic, that when my kid's chewing
Not
for
this reason.
And that's from, and by the way, that's from a professional.
Wow, she's only known me for how long?
I need to point out.
You know what?
Yeah.
We should bring in somebody who can diagnose you.
I didn't mean to interrupt what you were saying.
Laura, you're laughing a little bit too much, producer Laura.
I didn't want to, Mr. Guggenheim to have to tell us.
When
Well,
other people have a
there is no
disability,
statement that David.
Other people
Peter
have a
isn't.
disability, no one laughs.
Yeah. Well, sure.
Now, how do you feel?
Oh, are you saying I have them?
Potentially.
Oh, okay.
So the bigger issue to this is, this doesn't feel like 20% of the public. This feels much bigger. And a lot of articles I read said most Americans have grown more sensitive to noise since the pandemic. So if that's the case, more than 4 in 10 have become more sensitive to loud music. I mean, it's increasing.
Yeah.
What is that about, and how does that affect this?
And is that sensitivity the same as misophonia, or is it just the normal, there's more noise, you know, kind of?
Yeah, two fantastic questions. So the first part, and we've actually collected data from before the pandemic, and we can now collect more data to compare, because we gave people a long list of sounds and asked them, do you have a negative reaction to this? How does it make you feel, and how intense is that feeling? So we go back to those people now, we'd be able to compare whether there are more people now reacting to these sounds. But the key difference here is that, so for example, in our study on the general population in the UK, 85% of people said they didn't like the sound of loud eating. So that's really, really normal not to like that sound. But in that study, it was mostly they would feel irritation or disgust at that sound. Whereas in the misophonia group that we studied, it was 99% said they didn't like the sound of loud eating, and it was anger and panic were the two most popular reactions. So the nature of the reaction is really different. It's not just irritation. It's not just, oh, that's disgusting. It's more of this fight or flight kind of reaction, like feeling rage, anger, feeling panicky.
But it's hard when you say it. And Jason goes, wow, it's hard to explain to someone. You say disgust. It's against your will. It's not something that you're consciously doing. It's like the pen.
No, of course.
It crept in there, man, and I was like, uh-oh, which is why I laughed when you said the lollipop thing, because if you were doing that, I probably would have strangled you in your seat. I couldn't have taken it as long as you did, especially if there's a cadence to it. And I didn't realize until prepping for today that the dog pacing, oh my God, made me out. Do you have any of that, Laurie? Any of that? Yeah, you do. So this is starting to feel a little bit familiar to you. Yeah, and Dave, let's have Guggenheim jump on. He usually doesn't come on this early. But it's funny. It was such a reaction when I'm preparing it and talking to people. David goes, wait, and he's never done this before. Hold on. I think my daughter may have it. So why don't you ask? We have the expert here. Why don't you ask your question about your daughter and what behavior? Because that's fascinating, David.
Well, I believe that the doctor actually addressed it, because it's this dinner time thing, and she's 13 and my other kids are 8, and the chewing with your mouth open, she gets angry.
And not the visual. You're talking about the smacking sound, right?
Oh yeah, not the visual at all. They don't have their little cute mouths, but yeah, she gets very, very angry, and they're kids, and they're not able to necessarily do it, appropriately, and sometimes she just sort of, almost storms out of the dinner table because people aren't listening, and she's being driven so crazy.
It's unbelievable. So
there are a lot of families who have to eat separately because someone in the house can't stand the sound of the eating at the table.
Does it ever get so bad that, are we like putting noise canceling headphones on people so they can be in the same company?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or having music at the dinner table. Like for me, we just sort of take it in turns to pick a song from series just so that there's a bit of ambient background noise.
So wait a minute, you and your husband, who we should say is does comedy, he's a writer, correct? Yeah. You have to decide on, you don't talk during dinner, you have Siri put music on?
We also talk, but we have background music.
I wasn't making any accusations about your relationship. But.
We're doing fine.
Well, so what are the therapies? What are the things that you are recommending for people to try and deal with this?
It's hard to recommend because nothing has been really rigorously studied yet. We don't really understand what the sort of key mechanisms are that make this what it is, and we don't know if it can be cured. We don't know if we can just help people with the distress or help people with coping strategies. In our clinic, we do cognitive behavior therapy, but it's very much focused on helping people to create new associations with the sound. So it's based on the theory that you might not ever be able to ignore these sounds. You'll probably always dislike the sounds, but the fight or flight reaction is maybe because your brain has made some kind of association with this sound and some kind of danger or threat or violation, or just a fear of being overwhelmed by that sound. So that's what we're working on, is sort of helping people to create new associations with the sound and play around with sounds a little bit to feel like you've got a bit more control and bring it back to that level where, yeah, I don't like that sound. I wouldn't be able to do an exam if I had to listen to that sound, but I don't have to run out of the room if I hear it. I can maybe tolerate it for a little bit longer.
Can you give any kind of a specific sample of altering a sound, in your head in order to tolerate it?
Reassociate, yeah.
Yeah, so, well, sometimes it's doing something like playing a recording and then playing around with like software to distort the sound and make it, drag it out and then speed it up and just listen to it in different ways. And doing that when you're in control of it, when you could stop it at any time, and hearing it in different ways can help your brain just get used to that sound being something that is not dangerous.
So literally taking a recording of what I was doing with the pen and giving Peter the ability to alter that sound mechanically
could do it.
and form a different relationship with it. In some
Is that one of the biggest theories? Because I'd seen that science thought or thinks that it is an association, that just like a fetish is just like anything else, at some point at your age, you had an event that triggered that, and you didn't realize it, and associated that sound to some negative, and then years later it has embedded, and now it's like a fight-flight syndrome without you even knowing why.
I think it's probably part of the problem, not the only explanation. There are some people who go through a really clearly traumatic event and then develop a sensitivity to certain sounds, and that could be directly related to the trauma, and that's a really normal thing for the brain to do to try and protect you from that traumatic event. So say you had a car accident and the indicator was on, then that sound, that sort of ticking sound of the indicator, would be something that is trying to protect you from danger. But for most people with misophonia, it starts around sort of the age of 8 or 9 and then gets worse and sometimes gets better over time. But we don't think there's just one explanation for this. This is just one way of bringing down the intensity of the reaction and helping people to be able to live their lives again.
And what about, so many kids were diagnosed, or not even diagnosed, use ADHD and ADD medications for focus. They found that it doesn't necessarily work. But, I mean, there are documentaries on this where parents are putting their kids on so they can get better grades, et cetera. And that's to help cut out distraction and noise. It's about focus. Do you think this enters into that? That part of the ADD or ADHD problem could be the misophonia issue?
It's really interesting. There's a master's student that I was working with was looking at that exact question. And so she looked at traits of ADHD and traits of misophonia and whether they were associated. So as your score goes up on ADHD, does your score go up on misophonia? And it did. But once you accounted for general sensory sensitivity, which is a feature of both misophonia and ADHD, the association disappeared. So it could be explained by an overlap in general sensory sensitivity, but otherwise that is what explains the relationship between ADHD and misophonia. But if someone has both, then it's going to be much more of a problem because they're going to be much more distractible by the sounds.
Because they're distracted to begin with. Wow.
Has there been any connection that you found between misophonia and I think what it's called is an auditory hallucination, where people are either hearing things that most people can't detect at all or are creating a sound somehow internally that they are experiencing as an external sound?
As far as I know, that hasn't been studied and certainly hasn't been something that people have reported to me. But I do have some people who have said that once the sound has stopped, they feel like they can still hear it. And so that's sort of more like an echo of the sound.
It's like a phantom limb or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so that might just last for a little while afterwards, but it's not exactly the same as auditory hallucination.
Wow. Well, you know what? Since you're here, what we usually do is after the guest, we do what we call a second act, where we illuminate some other stuff. But since you're here anyway, I would love to do it with you here. Why not, right? Yeah. So the interesting thing that I found about the world getting louder, I started looking and saw how much more disrupted kids are in school, cognitive behavior. And one of the things is they found out that city birds are singing louder. Frogs that live near highways have marked vocal variations. And what that has done is altered their mating ability, altered their mating habits. So it's affecting nature. And the Park Service says that even outdoors, the sound of outdoors doubles or triples every 30 years. It gets louder and louder and louder, which I had no idea about this. And then you add to it the internet and the fact that Eric Schmidt has a great quote. In 2010, he said, "Every 2 days, we now create as much information as we did from the dawn of civilization up until 2003. So our bodies are being exposed to so much noise.
How did he make that calculation, by the way? How did he make it? How did he do it?
I'll call him and ask him. I'll
I
call
mean,
him
that
this.
seems a pretty absurd.
Eric
How
Schmidt.
does he know what
It's Eric Schmidt.
what people were coming up with in the year 1194? That's you know.
know
Listen, I
something?
don't want to undercut.
Eric
I don't
Schmidt?
mean to undercut Eric Schmidt or you in your
Hold on,
research.
Eric, turn off his Google. Anyway.
Oh, that was an
So-
annoying sound, by the way. That triggered me.
But there's more, as my brother would say, there's one, I don't love the phrase, but we only have so much bandwidth. So the noise does, I mean, right?
Yeah.
The noise is impacting us in ways that we're not aware. And,
Yeah.
and by the way, diabetes increase, hypertension increase, that they attribute to the noise that we're not even aware that we're getting. Plus, there's a hum. There is a hum that they say, a worldwide hum. Anybody here, raise your hand. 4% of the public, even when you're lying in bed and it's quiet, nothing's on, whatever, can hear this kind of hum that the earth puts out. Do you ever hear that?
you
You
started
know
to
about
react
it,
to
right?
I know about the hum, yeah, and it's stronger in certain places near
Right.
certain sort of plants, like manufacturing plants and things like that. There's a greater hum, but we still don't know exactly what it is
But
and
people
why
hear it.
some people can hear it and some people
Isn't
can't.
that-
My wife.
There you go.
Well,
Wait,
I
her
don't know if
sense
she
of
hears the
smell.
hum, but
Wait a
she
minute.
does. She has a very heightened. I'm telling you, I used to think she was nutty about this stuff, but she hears stuff that
There
I
you go.
don't hear, and she's. By the way, all her senses. She tastes with an acute sense. Her sense of smell is
And yet, she
extraordinary.
ended up
and
with
yet she's with me. A loud,
one of
smelly.
one of the senses, I guess, let her down. Let her down. She had a moment.
Yeah,
had
she
a
was so
moment.
busy using her senses, she didn't use her sense.
Didn't make any sense. Well, it's
Yeah,
it's
and the stress
yeah.
around that, like you were saying about the sort of environmental sound and the stress that causes, and then the impact, the knock-on effect that has on health. And most people, when they're going to move somewhere noisy, people say, "Oh, you'll get new." I don't even hear it anymore. But if the sound is there and you are not hearing it, your body is having to process it
Exactly.
and
It's like
ignore
inflammation.
it. So it
It's like
creates a
right.
lot of stress in the body.
And that's why I wanted to do this topic, because it affects everybody listening. It is like they now attribute everything to inflammation in the body.
Yep.
Your body is fighting this
Well,
constantly.
you know, the military is developing sound as weapon.
Yep.
There was a whole bunch of controversy for a while that when people were getting sick down in Cuba, I believe it
Right,
was,
that they were
thought it was
bombarding.
some sort of auditory, or sonic weapon. Listen, we did there. I'm so confused by this stuff because, for instance, my grandson, my little grandson, has a thing that he falls asleep to. It's essentially a white noise machine, but it also has a heartbeat on it. And we have no idea if this little kid, he can't communicate to us how he feels
Make him
about that
crazy.
sound. Now, he is falling asleep to that, and it seems to soothe him. But if he has any semblance of this, he's got this repetitive sound, thump, ba-thump, going on and on. We take for granted that sound is out there to soothe us, and yet we're all getting crazy. I remember, everybody will remember this, if you spend any time in a dorm room,
Oh.
that bass line, just the bass line coming through the cinder block wall, you wanted to kill yourself.
Oh, you know what used to get me?
Or the car behind you, if it's somebody who's decided to share their music selection with
So
the entire
I'm
neighborhood.
doing morning drive radio when younger, way back, and the kids are young. And I'm trying to sleep during the day. And two things my wife does, which I love so much. She will, when I'm trying to sleep, say to the kids, "Hey, Dad's trying to sleep," which, by the way, not helpful. But the other thing that came through the walls, Bert and friggin' Ernie. Hey, Bert, hey, Bert. Those voices, I wanted to kill a Muppet, strangle a Muppet with my bare
but
hands.
Elmo was okay?
Oh, none of Snuffleupagus. They would come through the wall. It would just didn't matter if
I
it
don't
was.
think you like puppets. I think that's the issue.
Well, we're getting
You're
puppet.
anti-puppet.
I,
You're an anti-puppet.
Now
I'm
the
an
truth comes out.
anti-puppet. My name's Peter Stillman, and I'm an
all about.
anti-puppet. I don't like puppeteer. I like puppets. Puppeteers, I think, should all have background checks. I'm just saying.
But have
So
you ever
that-
seen a puppet without a puppeteer?
You know what?
Oh, they're
No,
sick.
that's devil
They're
puppets.
strange.
Now,
Yeah,
whoa. We're getting into the doc. Where do you see a puppet?
I'm off
dog
duty.
without-
I'm not analysing. I'm just
Where do
judging.
you see a puppet without? That's scaring me.
Well, it's that thing about the ventriloquist dummy just sitting on the chair, and you go,
Yeah, I
that's
saw it in a movie.
strange thing."
It's called Magic. Where
Yeah.
have you seen it? Wow.
My husband used to live near the studio where they filmed the Muppets. And
No.
he's got a picture of himself at 3 years old with a wall of Muppets behind him.
Oh, wow.
And he's just,
Yeah, you're freaking out.
That's like me
freaked
looking
out.
at you with the fake deer head above your head over there. It's very,
Oh,
the whole
God,
thing
I
is
didn't
very
Wait a minute.
notice
How
that.
come your husband was around Muppets at 3?
Because he lived in the town where the studio was, so he did a tour of the studio. And
Oh, and did it affect? Could he watch the Muppets on TV or no?
I think he's okay.
You think he's okay? You think he's okay?
I'm gonna go
I mean,
back
he
to-
did become a comic, so
Oh, there?
maybe not. Maybe
I
not.
just, my head got triggered. We did the Seinfeld reference about you're an anti-dentite, but anti-puppet. But we did a whole episode. I actually directed the one episode of Seinfeld that I directed. We did an episode based on a true story where the sound of Mary Hart's voice, the co-host of Entertainment Tonight at that time, triggered someone into an epileptic seizure. And in our show,
on a
Kramer
true story,
started having
right?
seizures based on a true story.
Right.
And, so we talk about sound pitch. That is just a pitch that was able to trigger that. The note itself, and I think about, I still do not understand here in Los Angeles why we still have gas-powered lawnmowers and leaf blowers. And by the way, every gardener decides the perfect hour to cut grass is 7:30 in the morning.
No, mine is when we're recording. Whenever we record from home, is that? But the other thing I see, and I don't get this either. Growing up in Philadelphia, if you did your lawn, I did my lawn. What you do is you rake the lawn, bag it, and get rid of it. In LA, you're pushing it to your neighbor's lawn, who then pushes it to their neighbor. You're just moving crap
That's not how
south
it's
and north.
supposed to be done.
No,
They're supposed
no
to
one's picking
blow it
stuff up.
into
They're
a
all
pile.
blowing it into somewhere.
Well, that's not how it's supposed to go. I'll tell you the one other sound that is being used aggressively to create this tension. And again, because my wife is so sensitive to sound, she's picked up on it. But in horror films or in dramatic films or dramatic television, in the soundtrack
Subliminal?
now, there is an almost subliminal, it could be a heartbeat or it could, she feels it as a low sort of thrum, a note that is way down in the register, and it literally can start to make her anxietal. And sound designers have copped to using sounds to increase the tension level for the audience. So this is something, I don't have what you have, but everybody has some form of sensitivity to sound.
100%. And getting more so, again, wanted to do this episode, not because of me or misophonia, but because in reading all these articles about sound pollution and noise pollution, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, and it's affecting us societally, and people aren't even that aware of it. So I thought it was important to know, and I bet people...
You know what I think would be a big help?
What's that?
To reduce the noise? Just randomly, if we take half of the podcasts that are being put out there, just say, you know what, it's enough. Let's eliminate
I'm sensing good idea already.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
right? Right?
Yeah.
And that would reduce the amount of sound. And I even
We're
wonder,
not in that half,
seriously,
correct? We're
the
not in
amount
that half.
of the amount of electronic noise, because we are now in Radio Land. We have our
Everywhere.
phones. I mean, my headphones have been buzzing today.
I heard.
Because of the
I actually
proximity of
picked
my
it up.
phone.
I heard it.
And I go, if that's true, we must be picking up some of that stuff. And I wonder actually if our technology is heightening this condition or exacerbating it to the point where we
course it
are
is.
seeing more and more.
Whistling is another one.
That gets me as well.
Dude.
Especially bad whistling.
But nobody's
I can
by the
almost
way,
tolerate
by the way,
good whistling.
There's
but
only a couple good whistlers
yeah.
in the world.
Paul Simon, I think, is
and
the
they're
only
recording,
one.
okay? Everybody else is, can you whistle? Go whistle.
Well, that's going to make
Yeah, come on,
Go
man.
ahead. She's already unhappy. She's here.
I already did the pen clicking. I
want to hear you whistle. I just wanna hear-
as it is.
I want to see how much, if it bothers her more than me. Go ahead.
Oh, my God.
And by the way, yell out a number. From 1 to 10. that
in
bothers
relation
you.
to what?
He's going to whistle. You yell out a number that bothers you.
Okay.
Let's
Okay,
go 1 to
all
10. Here we go.
right, yeah.
Go ahead. 5. 5 going to 6.
Yeah,
7.
that's
7. 7.
Yeah.
Yeah. 7.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and not just the whistling itself, but there's the whistling coming. I can hear it both through the air and through the headphones, so I can kind of hear two different whistles.
And you
so
know what
it's-
else?
Yeah.
Did it have
bothers me?
anything to do with tune selection?
Yeah, that, and also what bothers me is
If I had done,
how
sort of
how earnestly you were
Moon
doing
River,
it too.
would that have been better?
It's the fact that you were zipping it along. I also wanted to kill you because of that. It's like that person who's zippity doo dah. You go,
How
I
dare
want
you
you
be
dead.
enjoying
I want
yourself."
you dead. I want you dead. Why are you
Oh, my
whispering?
God.
So Guggenheim, what do you
What do you got for us,
I'm glad
David?
we could address your daughter's issue. That was kind of cool.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that.
You're very welcome, and she charges by the hour. So
Yeah, you'll get a bill.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, you want your Guggenheim?
yes, we
Yes.
do. No, what are you
Okay.
thinking?
All right. Actually, I sort of decided to go a little bit opposite because we've been talking about noises today. So I wanted to go to the quietest places on Earth.
Oh,
Look at you deciding to do something that we don't want you to do on your own.
Yes, exactly. Well, I thought maybe it'll give you some
Inspiration.
Some
Right,
This is
yes.
annoying me now on a scale of a 1 to 10.
No, there is a place in Maui, Hawaii called the quietest place on earth. Lori actually has been there. It's let's see, Haleakala.
Haleakala, the volcano.
The top of the
Haleakala.
volcano?
You have to. It's like a
have to throw yourself into the volcano.
climb. You have to go down into the crater, the dormant crater, and that is one of the quietest, if not the quietest places.
Well, that is very
naturally
interesting because
occurring
I haven't
on
been.
Earth.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, it's apparently it's quite a hike. It's like they say there's like 4 climate.
But wait a minute.
zones you have to-
Whoa. Don't you hear when you're there, people from New York going, so this is supposed to be the quietest place? Aren't you hearing that? All the tourists talking.
Well,
It's not that
you-
quiet.
Yeah, it's not that quiet.
Well, do you know something? What's weird? I've been to the rim of the volcano because you can go up there and watch the sunrise and then bicycle down. And I've done that with my children on a number of occasions. And I will tell you, even with groups of tourists standing there at the rim, there is, when you speak, there is a sort of compression on it, a damper on it. I have noticed that, and I thought,
so
well,
Lori,
maybe
come
it's
in.
the
She was there. She
pre-dawn
went.
air
She
or
went.
something
Come
like
on,
that.
come in.
Lori, come on in, babe.
Boy, she's just so resistant every time. It takes so long. You're going to come in anyway. Now you're not doing it.
Now
Now
she's
she's
coming.
doing. Oh
She's
my
not
god.
coming.
Oh my god.
Oh my
She's
God,
coming.
it takes forever.
I know it
Right.
takes forever.
She's not coming.
This is more annoying than the noise.
She's
I'll
doing
tell
it
you
to-
that.
Come on in. Here, use my microphone.
This is more annoying than the noise. So wait. So why did you decide to go to? You always fascinate me.
Make sure keep her off screen, please.
Laurie does the coolest
Now she's
thing.
off screen.
Laurie actually does cool.
Have her come in. Have her
Have
come
her
in.
come in.
We
Come
can't
in.
see her.
You want to be on
I'm here.
Yeah, she's got to be on screen.
Oh.
You got to see her.
Got a frame.
You know we have
There she
video
is.
here. We
There
do
she
video
is.
now, Laurie.
There you
Are you aware of that?
There we are.
So wait, so why did you decide? I'm curious because we go to Maui, and I don't want to work that hard by climbing up and going down, whatever.
Well-
but you did it because
Well, we all went to the top, and then you ride the bikes down.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I became hysterical, and I did it for like.
hysterical crying.
Well, I said I'm going to do it, and then I got on the bike and I started going down, and I realized this is what they tell you, and maybe they told you this: people die on the way down.
When
don't
did they tell you that? As you're going?
As you're going, and a woman had a bee come into her helmet, and she was like this, and then she crashed and died. And they have a lot of people who died. They don't tell you that.
You know why?
And
Because
I-
nobody would. Because no one would take the ride. They're not
I
going to
tell
say,
you,
"Hey,
when
come."
you sign the waiver.
Well, yeah, but so I started, and then I was like, "This is too much." So there's a van that follows you. So I just hopped into the van because it's terrifying. It's
so not so
terrifying.
quiet. For
But you didn't go into the crater, did you?
No, you just ride the bike. You went into the crater?
No, he's talking about
I thought
the
you said
quietest
into the
place.
crater.
He's down
David's
in the
talking about going in
crater.
the
Okay, but you don't go into the crater.
Well,
you
some
You
people
can go
do.
into the
Some
crater.
people do.
You
They
can
just
go
into
into
the
the
crater.
crater. That's
Do
where
they?
the
Yeah.
The woman who crashed obviously went into the crater.
I like the Vider is like the dad in Freaks and Geeks, where it's like, do you know what happens to people who go to quiet places? They die.
And by the way, Laurie, if they had that on the stand where you sign up, don't think a lot of people would be going. You know
I'm
what I
going to
mean?
go. No, I have to tell you something about David, though. While the guys in there were hysterical, he was practicing saying Haleakala while you were there, and he was like, Haleakala, Haleakala.
Which, by the way, you
Which
doing
we
that?
do
Okay,
have
you wanna do it?
recorded, and we're going to play
By the way,
it.
do that again.
Haleakala.
That's on a scale of 1 to 10. That's a 5.
That's
a
a
5.
five. Yeah, it's very breathtaking.
Laurie actually has a
No, I have a horrible voice.
all right, you do.
I do. Thank you.
Have you heard about the rooms that are designed to be completely silent, and that they're like trying to mimic the quiet place on earth?
Yeah.
But people who go into
Yes.
those rooms,
Where-
they don't last because
It-
they're driven mad by the sound of their own like internal
Right.
bodily
They can't.
experience.
If you speak in those rooms, you can't hear your own voice.
Oh, it's dead. It's dead.
It
But you can
dead.
hear your own heartbeat, you can hear your
Yeah.
digestive
It kind
system,
of makes
you
you-
can hear
I
your
wanna know
blood
what's
going
going
through.
wrong inside of me because I know stuff's going wrong.
That's
Oh,
a
my
sound.
God.
That's a sound that gets. Sometimes when I lie, if your arm is under your head when you're lying on the pillow and you hear the blood moving
pulsing,
through your
yeah.
veins, oh, I don't like that. One of the most beautiful things I ever heard. Seriously, there is a beautiful actor singer. His name is Brian Stokes Mitchell. He's a big Broadway star.
Right.
He does concerts all over the world, and in his concerts, he does a thing that is extraordinary because he sings with a microphone. He's usually with a band, so he has to sing over the band. But he goes, we have gotten so used to hearing our voices amplified. I'd like to do something for you because these these theaters are built for acoustics. I'm going to sing something a cappella without the microphone. And then he does. And after hearing, we're so used to that. And to hear a voice as beautiful as his, where you lean forward in your seat in order to hear it, you open up something about yourself in order to take more sound in. It is one of the most thrilling things for every audience I've ever seen him do it for. The experience of opening yourself to sound the way it was supposed to be perceived, and that we're not used to
Not
anymore.
to
It was
undersell
really
the fact
beautiful.
that people are distracted and doing a lot of stuff, even when they're supposedly just listening, that it's forced listening too, where you're more attentive to the sound and more aware of what you're listening to. So, I mean, I love when you go to concerts. Now, when we went to concerts, you watch a concert. Now, everybody's filming.
Oh yeah, everybody has to watch it through their
So you're
phone,
not
so
even
they
really
realize they're
watching.
there.
Yeah, you're not really getting the sound, and amplification is so different
bet.
now. Yeah, just that is amazing. Well, Guggenheim,
David,
what else
anything
you got?
else you got for us there, sir?
Yeah, no. Well, you guys actually covered a lot of it. The quietest, the actual quietest place on Earth is in the Microsoft headquarters there in Redmond, Washington, where they have one of these chambers, a somewhat new chamber than the doctor was referring to. It's called an account. I'm sorry.
You should have practiced
Wow,
that.
that's the one you should have practiced.
Yeah, really. What is that? What is that? Come on.
Let's just call it Haleakala. Let's, for argument's sake, say it was Haleakala. Yeah, right.
Anyway, it is so quiet in there. Not only can you hear your breathing, your heart beating, the blood going, you can actually hear the grinding of your own bones. And in the previously quietest...
Wait a minute, let me just take that in for a minute.
What?
The grinding of my own bones.
To be fair, I can hear
Yes.
my own knees going up the stairs now.
You can do that already. See, she does that already. So go ahead.
sake.
It's no big deal for the doctor.
In yes, well, we'll do that. In the previously quiet place, they've built a new one that might be even quieter than what they have in the Microsoft facilities. But the old one, the Orfield Laboratories in Minneapolis, they have an experience that if you could pay for being in one of the quietest places on Earth for over. If you could do 3 hours, I believe they give you the experience free. Otherwise, it's $600 an hour. But the longest a person has made it in that chamber with the lights turned out is only 45 minutes. People can't take.
Dude, I can't take if you turn a room, the lights off, and it's totally devoid of I'm gone in like 30 seconds. I'm so claustrophobic. So
As I said, a team of therapists working around.
Oh yeah, because you got no
24.
I brought some friends. There
Yeah, really.
Hey doc, I'm starting to like you less. The funniest thing was the doctor sat down and she's moving around, and the sofas make fart sounds and whatever.
Yeah,
and
well, it's
I
a
go,
leather
fart
sofa,
sounds
yeah.
don't bother me unless they're rhythmic. By the way, sound of farting. Anybody farting bother you? Make you crazy?
Same. If someone's running and farting, you know how it like comes out with every
running
step.
fart, the running fart.
Oh yeah,
that'll get me.
The repetitive
But
time.
otherwise, farts are hilarious.
Did you
Like,
ever
we all
see?
know
Did
that.
you ever see the tape of the Reverend Tilton?
No.
They put it together.
Oh,
where
that is
that right?
fantastic,
If you're
yeah.
listening to this now, it's Tilton, not Tilton. But the Reverend Tilton, they have him doing his
He
sermon.
has a strange affectation where, in the middle of speaking, he will squint as high as heart. It looks like he's bearing down on something.
Yeah, like he squeezes his face, and every time he does it, he goes, "And we're gonna ask for money." And you're so it's one of the best farting tapes. If you like farting tapes,
Yeah, I do.
This is endorsed.
And
by
who
River
doesn't?
Morton.
Especially because almost every time when he does that gesture, he follows it with, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God. Thank you, God."
And then-
so it's
but-
always, "Thank you, God."
But he also does what they do that's so brilliant is even when he's not doing that, sometimes he runs across the stage, and of course when he runs across the stage, it's with every cadence. So, you know,
All
it's
right,
great
on that note, we
you know
gotta
it's
get
great
out
that
of
we
here.
had you in here, a professor who studies something just major, and we've now
And we've
reduced
reduced it.
to the
We've
Reverend
reduced
Tilton's
it
farting
down.
tape.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to know more about Dr. Jane Gregory and her work, please go to her website, Sounds Like Misophonia. That's MISOPHONIA. SoundsLikeMisophonia.com. You can also find her at Sounds Like Miso on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And you're a good sport, of course, because you're married to a comedian. So
I am.
a
Yeah.
life's fun.
I'm
what does
used
he
to
do?
tolerating it.
What does he do that pisses you off?
He's
sound.
a really loud breather.
Yeah.
Really loud.
Most comedians are. They're mouth breathers. They're
So
just-
that guy. So when he's
Yeah.
sleeping, you want to put the pillow over his head and kill him.
Oh, we sleep in separate rooms now because it's too loud.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Doing that
That's
right
me
there.
and Peter.
I
at
told
the
you we're
same time.
doing fine, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's really loud.
By the way, you keep, just as a doctor, I'm just honestly just saying, you keep saying we're doing fine a whole lot. Just something to look into.
Thanks for joining us today on Really No Really. You can learn more about us and communicate with us on reallynoreally.com. If you have a Really No Really of your very own that you'd like to share with us,
Really?
or maybe have us explore, leave us a suggestion there. If we do it on the show, we'll mention you, and we might even send you a hat or a clown head
Or a picture of Haleakala.
or a picture of Holly
we go.
Aquila.
There we go.
You will hear new episodes of our show every Tuesday
Regardless, if you want
on
to.
the iHeart app, the
Right.
Apple app, wherever you get your podcasts. If
Yes.
you're watching on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. And we will see you again very, very soon. Listen carefully. You'll hear us coming.